Season 15, Episode 1 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And we are starting a new season after like 3 months of not recording. I was away in D.C. for a little bit, and then we took some time to get back into the swing of things. Starting a new book, a collection of essays from Réginald Garrigou-Lagrange, a neo-Thomist 20th century philosopher, titled Philosophizing and Faith, Essays on the Beginning and End of Wisdom. So essays taken from throughout his career.
I'm not officially doing this under protest.
Uh-oh.
But you know, I'm sure our listener is, really happy to have us back because it's been quite a long break.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of clamoring for another episode.
I was getting requests pretty much every day.
Oh, really?
No, this is a joke. I'm being
I was like,
facetious.
I didn't get any requests at all. And which kind of reminds me of my Substack that I have had no one read. And now I just want to keep it as a streak.
And see how long it takes for you to get a single, reader? Or do you want to keep it at zero?
No, I want to keep it at zero. I think it's a little bit of a challenge in
Yeah?
today's world. You put something on the internet, but I need to actually write stuff too.
Yeah.
Because
If you don't write anything, nobody's going to read it.
That is true. So I have some ideas, but I need to move forward. So if anybody wants to know my Substack, don't ask because I don't want anyone to read it.
Well, how easily Googleable is it? Like if you just Google Mark Bishop Substack, does it come up?
I don't know. I would never look it up. Why would I look up my Substack?
I know if you'd be curious to see if people can find it.
Oh, I don't know. I assume that
It's a challenge for the listener. The listener can
Yes.
tell us if they Google
Only
Mark
had
Bishop Substack.
three articles on there over a period of 5 years, maybe, or something.
Wow, that's a good.
But two of them
good
were
streak.
like in the last 6 weeks.
Yes.
So I was planning on doing it every other week, and then I lapsed even that.
Yes. Well, that's great.
I'm a busy man.
You are. You
Not
are.
really. I mean, I am, but
This is just sad.
anywho, I'm a little nervous about this book because not only does it have an introduction, it has a translator's introduction. So it's like double introductions, and then there's going to be an introduction before every chapter. So you
Before every
chose
part.
for a part.
Yes.
Yes.
So I guess we should say the structure of the book, and I could talk a little bit about who Garrigou-Lagrange is.
Yeah. Why don't you explain? You chose this
Yes,
one.
I did choose this.
So why are we reading this?
So I have never read anything by Garrigou-Lagrange.
I can't believe that. I've read so much. No, I've not read. I never even heard. I did not know this person existed until you mentioned you want to read the book.
Yes. So Lagrange was, let me actually check the dates. I have him pulled up a little bit ago. I believe 1877 is when he was born.
Okay.
Let me double check.
So by your standards, he's a modern.
Yeah, 1877 to 1964. So he was a Dominican friar, philosopher, theologian. So he's considered a neo-Thomist. So what that group of people is people who are, following like sort of the philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas, especially after Pope Leo XIII, who called for a revival of Thomism as sort of like the standard Catholic philosophy towards the end of the 19th century. So sort of rising up, against, sort of the modern philosophies, sort of arguing that these aren't necessarily compatible with like Catholic thought. So Pope Leo XIII issues this encyclical calling for a revival of specifically scholasticism, Thomism, to be brought back in universities. And so Lagrange was sort of an early figure of this and a very leading figure sort of in neo-Thomism, sort of arguing that, this Thomistic philosophy is compatible with sort of modern thought in some ways. Or is compatible like in the modern day, like this should be used by modern people.
So what are people that are acolytes of St. Thomas Aquinas now? What are they called? Thomists?
Yeah, Thomists.
Or neo-postmodern Thomists? Or is there another term?
I mean, you can call them neo-Thomists. I think usually people who consider themselves Thomists just say Thomists.
Yes.
And there's debate on what parts of St. Thomas, are still applicable, what he gets wrong, what he gets right. And so it's like still live debates and all these things.
And you've studied a lot of Thomas Aquinas.
A decent amount, yeah.
What is your favorite thing about Thomas Aquinas? Like his favorite, or what is the thing he got most wrong?
He got most wrong. That's a good question.
All right, we'll think about that. We'll have an answer for the next episode.
Okay.
That's a teaser.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about him.
Yeah. You should read some more of his stuff. He's good.
Yeah. I don't think I've read any of his stuff.
Yeah. Really?
I've read of people who write about him.
Yeah.
which seems to be the thing now. There's like a big, I think modern, the last few years, really, the revival, so to speak, of, political commentators or popular philosophers, I don't know if you want to call them that or whatever, talk about Thomas Aquinas, at least in the Catholic world theory.
Yeah, he's definitely becoming more popular, I think, among like conservative political commentators, especially. Like, it's hard to find like conservative political commentators who don't reference Aquinas at this point in some capacity.
Right, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so this author, he's writing about, like, he's a neo-Thomist.
Neo-Thomist, yes.
And so was he prominent in his own era?
I'd say so. I think he's one of the most prominent.
How did you know? How did you hear about this?
I mean, I've heard his name, cited, here and there for like forever, or at least since I started getting into the more the Thomistic stuff. I guess I should say, like, the way I got into Thomism was like through the Thomistic Institute, down at University of Florida, which I now lead down there, our chapter. And so, like, reading groups and lectures and stuff like that.
Are you the head of the Thomistic Institute?
Yeah, down at University of Florida.
Are you really? I didn't know that. I knew you're involved. What title do you have?
President. What other title?
Well, I don't know. I didn't. There's like a structure.
Yeah.
And so how were you selected as president? Was it like one of those meetings where, like, who wants to do this, and you're the one who raised your hand, or is there
essentially? We have a very informal process. Okay. Like on the books, we're supposed to have elections, but the way it's gone for, like, I think the entire time the Thomistic Institute existed, it's been a group of like 2 or 3 people running it, and then they're like, "Hey, you've helped out. Do you want to help run it next year?"
Yeah,
and then.
Kind of like unanimous consent.
Yeah, essentially. Like nobody would oppose the people who are, who are eventually selected because other people who help run the events.
Unless they're really freaks or jerks or something.
Yes, that's true.
So you're president. I did not know you were president of the. What else are you president of down there?
I think just that. I think that's the only thing I can claim the president title of.
Okay.
Involved with other things.
Okay, so you got into the Thomistic Institute and that kind of stuff. So what's this guy's claim to fame, the one we're reading about? I mean, how do we know him? How prominent is he, and why do you want to read him?
So a lot of his stuff, from what I know, is more like spiritual rather than like philosophical. Like he was a big advocate of like Thomism being compatible, like having a really rigorous philosophy behind the more spiritual stuff. So like St. John of the Cross, I don't know if you've heard that name, but he was a real spiritual sort of mystical writer. And so he argues that like Thomistic philosophy is compatible with like St. John of the Cross's thinking.
Okay.
And I forget the name of the book, the three ways. I had it pulled up. One of his most famous books would be, let's see.
I'm familiar with the 4 ways, which is a rotary test.
Yeah. The 3 Ages of the Interior Life, I think, is his most famous.
Ages of the Interior Life. Interesting.
Synthesis of Christian Perfection, Contemplation, and Love of God, and the Cross of Jesus. He has a whole bunch of other books that he published. He was a pretty prolific author. He taught Jacques Maritain was his student, if you've heard that name.
Yeah.
So another Catholic 20th century philosopher. He was a student of Lagrange. So Maritain is also a neo-Thomist.
Famously the namesake of a great ZZ Top song, Lagrange.
Yeah, that's
isn't that a reference to this guy?
I don't think so.
Every time you mention his name, I think of ZZ Top. That's my favorite ZZ Top song.
Yeah, it's a good song. Yeah. One of the listeners also made that exact same reference. So she said the exact same thing when I mentioned the Lagrange. She's like, "Oh, the ZZ Top song." I'm like, "Yeah, that's right."
You got to marry that person.
I'm planning on it.
I had advice. I don't know if you remember my advice to you boys. If you find a reasonably attractive woman who laughs at your jokes, marry her. That was my. I don't know. Do you recall me saying that? Yes, I think that's. And your mother is always offended by that because she always says, "What do you mean reasonably attractive?" The funny thing is she doesn't really laugh at my jokes anymore. I mean, she does, but she doesn't want to.
Yeah.
Do you ever, like when you're telling somebody a joke and they're trying not to laugh? It's a challenge.
I should clarify so the listener doesn't get mad at me. I also think that the particular listener we're talking about is more than reasonably attractive. So before she gets mad at me for chuckling,
it's my advice. It's my advice. I'm not commenting on anybody else. I wasn't even commenting on your mother. It was just good advice.
Yes,
I've got a lot of good advice.
That's great.
Nobody asked me.
Yeah. Well, they can listen to the podcast and hear all about it.
Okay.
Well, I should say, so
yes.
the book itself, so this is a collection by Matthew Minard, who is, just reading sort of the back, a Ruthenian Catholic, husband and father, serving as professor of philosophy and moral theology at St. Cyril and Methodius Byzantine Catholic Seminary in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So Lagrange did not actually collect these essays as sort of one cohesive thing, but Minard put all these together, translated them out of either the French or the Latin, whatever they were originally in, organized them. So there are... 5 parts. The first part is logic, then certain questions concerning knowledge, then moral and political philosophy, and then critical philosophical essays, and then ending with philosophy, faith, and theology. So this time we're talking about the first essay in the logic chapter, which I found interesting. You said, and I think you're right, that it's not easy reading.
Yes.
You definitely have to pay attention to what's going on here. It's a short essay, but it's dense.
Yes, and, it's like you could read some like novels, especially, or like I can, like I just reread Fahrenheit 451, and that's that I can be tired and read that, but this stuff I can't. If I'm kind of tired or drowsy, I can't read this stuff, because I have to concentrate on it. I remember I was reading this, I kept having to shake my head, like, all right, because I kind of it's so I don't know, technical, but it's like. It's not telling a story, right?
Yeah.
I'm not just kind of drifting off into a good yarn, as they say. But it was interesting. Anywho, but yeah, it's gonna be work getting through this. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So do you want to get to it?
Sure. I mean, just a couple notes, I think, from like the translator's introduction that I thought were helpful, because he's talking about, why put this together. Minard himself is kind of interesting because he's Byzantine Catholic, so he's not.
Yeah, we talked about that. Right? So it's not technically a Roman Catholic, I guess. No,
so he's an Eastern Rite Catholic. I don't know his whole background, his whole historical background. But I guess at some point he was either born into the Byzantine sort of Catholic world, or he sort of switched rites over to that. So he's not Roman Catholic, but they're in union with the Catholic Church.
Yeah. So what does that mean? I mean, they're Catholic, but they don't have all the same pomp and circumstance. Or
so a lot of it's different liturgies. I don't know specifically about the Ruthenian Catholics, but like the Byzantine Catholics as a whole, like their liturgies, instead of like being in Latin, they'll be in Greek. So they have like a Greek liturgy, and it'll be slightly structured differently. They'll have different sort of prayer traditions and stuff like that. A lot of like the like Eastern rites were like previously schismatic groups that either broke off at some point in history and rejoined, or they were separate rites that just sort of developed independently of sort of Latin Rite Catholicism. Never like said we're separate, but they're just like throughout history. Their traditions differed. And so they agree on all the same theology. They agree on everything, but they sort of have a different tradition look at it.
Interesting. I always wonder if like the Greek Orthodox churches will ever join back up.
Yeah, I mean...
They're pretty close.
It's possible. I don't know how likely it is. The Russian Orthodox, much less likely than like the Greek Orthodox. But I know like last year, because it was the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea, Pope Leo had a whole bunch of meetings with the ecumenical patriarch of the Greek Orthodox. And so I think one of his goals is to try and reunite as much as possible. But I don't know how likely it is. Yeah,
it's fascinating.
Yes.
Because it split off so many years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he says that the point that I wanted to make there is he says, I'm not a Roman Catholic. Why am I translating St. Thomas Aquinas, right? Very... the core sort of Latin, Catholic thinker. He says, it is an act of filial piety, one not always encouraged by contemporary academia, ever ready to pressure intellectuals to present their thought as something new to tenure committees, to recognize one's intellectual forebears. It's like me as a Catholic.
That's a fancy way of saying whatever he's trying to say. Don't you think?
Yeah.
So what is he saying with that?
He's saying, like, we owe something to the people who came before, right?
Yes.
And the pressure of the modern world is to always say something new. We're not saying anything new necessarily. We're looking at the same, 800-year-old philosophy that can be applied to modern issues. We can look in new ways at it, but sort of it's an act of piety to respect that and to carry it on.
Yes. Do you think that there's really any way to have a new thought?
I think so. I can't come up with an example because I feel like every time I try, it's something.
Like if you find somebody else has already said it and written it down and explained it a lot better than I can.
I've seen some people mention.
I found that a little sad.
Yeah.
And when I was your age, I was really egotistical. I was convinced I would have something new to say.
Yeah.
And it's really the only new things I have to say are new to the people I'm saying them to, because they're more ignorant of the world than I am.
Yeah.
But when I say something that's like some people think are really insightful, but it's almost always somebody's already said it before.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like when I write, I'm in some ways plagiarizing someone else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're always building on what came before. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. I always kind of feel like subconsciously I probably read this somewhere.
Yeah.
And now I'm saying
You're
it's
just repeating
my
it.
own.
Yeah.
So I guess if I have modern references,
Yeah.
like as long as I reference current affairs, then it can't be like something that just happened last week. Then it can't be that I've just stolen somebody else's idea,
Yeah.
inadvertently or intentional.
Yeah.
Because it's recent.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing with jokes. Anyway. Are there jokes that haven't been said yet?
I mean, probably.
Yeah, but it almost have to be referencing
current
some
events.
current or new thing.
Yeah. Maybe.
But there are some comedians that are just so creative. Like Seinfeld when he was. I mean, I think he's still very interesting and creative the way he looks at the world. But certainly early on, it was unusual. Yeah. And Stephen Wright, the one-liner king, who's now passed, but he was great. Anyway, sorry.
No, those are good recommendations. No, I was just going to say, I've heard people say, like, is there anything new in philosophy that wasn't said by, like, the ancient Greeks?
Yeah.
I've heard that brought up. And I've seen some people point to, like, nominalism in the medieval world, that there's really not, like, an ancient precedent to that. Like, that was a very new thing that came up for the medieval, specifically with the questions they were considering that weren't considered by the Greeks.
Yeah.
So it's, like, kind of things like that. And it's like, I think we've talked about this before, but, like, who's really an original thinker? Like, I don't know. Maybe Kant was really original, maybe Descartes, but I've seen a lot of arguments for and against stuff like that they're, I mean, even Descartes' I think, therefore I am, that exists in St. Augustine.
Right.
If I doubt, I am.
Right.
It's essentially the same thing.
But Descartes kind of had my attitude when I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
Like,
I
I'm
have
going
to
to come
start
up with,
fresh.
I'm going to start fresh because I'm brilliant and I'm going to create my own, universal philosophy or whatever. Oh yeah. Well, somebody already did that. Yeah. This somebody else has already written a book on it.
Right.
It's depressing.
Yes. Well, let's get into the essay.
That's what
here.
this guy is doing.
Yes.
Is he's the author, which is the compiler of Judicii Lagrange. His thoughts, because it's worthwhile to study. The really thoughtful people from, even if there's 800 years ago, there's certain principles that still apply to modern world.
Right. Yes. I agree. Anything else, maybe from the introduction to part one, that you wanted to mention here?
No, not really. I mean, it was just an intro, so I don't know if I have any comments on it other than okay.
Maybe there is one important point that he says sort of right at the beginning. This is on page 3. Talking about like what logic is, why it's important. He says it studies the particular kinds of relations the human knower forms among things insofar as they are known by us. So sort of defending like what is the purpose of studying logic? Well, it's like it's how we understand everything, right? What is the relation of us to this fact that I know, or this idea, this proposition, whatever it may be? That's very important. How exactly we relate to the world around us, how we understand it. So I think that's a good defense of why we care about logic, why we care about reasoning and stuff like that. Like it seems very technical, very minute, but it actually has a lot of implications on what we do in our daily lives.
Yeah, and I like how he on page 5. I forgot that I had this highlighted. It's talking about the reason why we'd study it, and he says, describing the modern world, he says, "For we seem to live in an intellectual climate that would reduce all reality to socially constructed thought and culture." And that's important if you're going to be studying logic, or you're studying these philosophy of trying to establish what is real, what is meaningful. I think that's that modern thought and philosophy of everything's just a construct,
right,
is so destructive to everything meaningful in the world. Your own character. What your beliefs are, what your family history is, what the ideals for your nation or your community are. Well, that's just a construct. It's like, well, it's all equal. It's a form of relativism. Like all things are of equal value. It's just all constructed, just modern, and there's no truth that cuts through and is binding upon the world.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
So I like that.
Yes. Well, I guess we can get right into the first chapter here, which is titled On the Twofold Via Inventionis and the Twofold Via Judicii according to St. Thomas.
Yes.
So as you mentioned, very, very dense reading here. And essentially what he's arguing is he says St. Thomas has this distinction, right, about how we know things. There's the Via Inventionis, or the way of discovery, and there's the Via Judicii, the way of judgment, corresponding to our knowledge of God, of like how do we come to know God. One is this way that ascends to God and then descends from him to the things of the universe. And he says, after this, I intend to show how St. Thomas holds that there's another Via Inventionis and another Via Judicii, which in the constitution of the sciences are, as it were, A, direct knowledge that discovers various conclusions, and then B, reflexive or critical knowledge concerning the value of the principles drawn from these conclusions. So
You're gonna have to summarize that for our listeners.
Yes,
but yeah, I just want to say this before we kind of break it down or whatever. Is I was having a hard time with the terms because they're not natural terms to me, but the Via Judicii,
yes,
I had to look it up, and then like sometimes it's spelled with a J, and so they'd be like, judicial,
yes,
right.
Yeah,
and so
that's
that's
what it is.
the core word. I'm like, okay, so that deals with judgment,
Yes,
and understanding the best course of action or
Yes.
the making those value judgments. And that helped me out a lot because it's like, for me, it's reading a foreign language.
Yeah.
If there's Latin in there, I took like 3 semesters of Latin in undergrad, and still don't know how I passed. I think they just felt sorry for me, and I needed that to graduate because that was my foreign language. I took Latin.
right.
I was like, you're like a version of me when I was that, not all in all ways, but in that respect of your interest in certain topics, you're like a version of me, but competent.
Thanks.
We had the same interests, but you would study and you would get A's. And I didn't like studying. And
So you didn't get A's.
I did not get A's, especially in Latin. I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh, Latin was great. I love taking Latin.
Okay. Although it has helped me because I understand like the root words and I recognize that, and it's surprising how much. Of course, I'm in the legal field. How much the terms that we use, explaining in the legal concepts and principles, it really has helped me that I took Latin, although I didn't really know Latin.
Right.
I mean, I knew Latin words.
Right.
The grammar. Grammar was hard.
Yes, well, that's a big aspect of language is grammar.
Yes, so like
That's why you didn't get A's.
Yeah, so like my version of Latin is like me mark, me smart, that rock. Like that was my level of Latin understanding grammar. I would know those words, but I could not write in a sentence form other than like 2 words.
Right.
Or it would be like a jumbled mess. And I'm sure that if I had AI back then, I would have cheated.
Yeah.
Anyway, probably would have learned more because we didn't have resources like that. I mean, it could have helped.
Yes.
Or it would have just been a crutch. Anyway.
So essentially, what the argument he's making in this article, this essay, is that sort of the classical understanding of this is that this is a description of how we know God and then how we judge the world according to like the eternal principles. He says we can apply this also to science, and this is an element in St. Thomas's thought, so to our understanding of more things than just God in that way. But he says he starts off concerning the classical Via Inventionis, right, discussing what this is. And he quotes St. Thomas here in the Summa Theologiae. He says, according to the Via Inventionis, we arrive at knowledge of eternal things by way of temporal things. He says, however, in the Via Judicii, we judge according temporal things by means of eternal things that are already known. So the argument that he's making is like we can come to some knowledge of God by considering things that are not God, essentially. Like concerning the natural world, right? We can see, this is a very classic, right, Aristotelian point, right? That we can see that this thing is good, and we're comparing it to some standard, right? That means there must be some higher good. Some more perfect thing, right? So in that sort of way, right, we can understand that there's some eternal goodness that I am appealing to that is not limited by these temporal things, or that there's, every time I see a circle, there is not any perfect circle that I see in the world, but I know that a perfect circle exists. So it's like sort of these degrees of perfection. We have to assume that there is some ultimately good thing that is eternal and unchanging that we are understanding.
Yes.
You're looking quizzical.
No. I've always rejected the thought that the perfect circle doesn't exist.
Really?
How do we assert that?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I mean, it's like if you go in microscopically, it's not going to be a perfectly straight line. Like even just like in the material, like of the pencil that you're drawing with or whatever it might be, there's going to be a slight indentation somewhere, right? With the way that the graphite.
Somewhere there is.
Yeah.
It's like, and they also say, like, no two snowflakes are the same. Really? How do you know? How is that possible?
Have you studied every snowflake?
Yeah. I mean, do you know how many, I guess, trillions of snowflakes have existed in the history of Earth? And not two of them are exactly alike?
It's a lot of snowflakes.
I think there's a limited amount of shapes. But then it gets me on thinking, like, how do we know there's not been two humans that are exactly alike? But of course, there's twins.
But I mean, I guess just in the fact that they exist in different places, right? That their place is different, therefore they're distinct. They have different experiences as soon as they exist.
Anyway, yeah, I have a problem with like universal statements, which of course a lot of them like all parents love their children. Everybody should vote. All these, anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
So back to him. I mean, it's like, okay, what else do you have to say? Are you still summarizing this stuff?
Yeah, I'm still summarizing this stuff. So he says, like the 5 ways, right? The classic, Thomistic argument of like how we can know God, purely by natural reason, right? That's sort of the Via Inventionis applied to God. The Via Judicii.
You're talking in code.
Yes, I'm talking on page 12 here.
Yeah, but you're talking in code you're going too fast.
I apologize.
You're not really sorry. No, because like you're assuming that people know the 5 ways.
Right.
Because I've read the 5 ways that isn't that his proof of how do you know that God exists?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the 5 ways.
He kind of lists them here on page 12 without really describing them too much. He says the first mover of bodies and spirits.
Yeah. So somebody has to be the first mover.
Yes.
The universe exists, so there has to be a God to have been the first mover to get this stuff going.
Essentially,
right?
yeah.
And then the second one is the supreme cause, which is very similar to the first mover.
Somewhat, yeah.
But it's like the purpose or the cause of the existence. There has to be a God.
Yeah. There has to be something that is always in act that was uncaused.
Yes.
Right? That did not at some point need something else to cause it.
Yes.
Right? That has to be God, right?
Yes.
Something that's always in act.
And then the necessary being, which there has to be a being that exists and existed in order for the universe to exist. So there has to be the core being, right?
Yeah.
Summarizing it. And then
the supreme truth and good, that's sort of like the comparison idea, right? If we judge that this thing is better than this other thing, right? How do we have some sort of standards if everything's temporal and just sort of related to each other? There has to be some ultimate truth, ultimate goodness that we're appealing to.
Right.
And then the orderer of the universe, right? Sort of the argument from design, the fact that everything works so well and everything works with each other, that there has to be an intelligent sort of design behind all of this.
And I think that last one is the one that's really convincing in modern times. The most people to go from atheism or agnosticism to theism. When they're really, really technical scientists, when they're really getting close to like the building blocks or really complex math or biology and chemistry and all that stuff, it's like somebody had to put this together. It's fascinating. I watch interviews of people that are super smart, and they if they go off onto the tangent of belief in God, it's almost always that last one. Those types of people, which is really, really fascinating, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's his
Via Inventionis, the way of discovery. Right?
Yes.
How do we come to knowledge that God exists?
Yes.
And then the Via Judicii, the way of judgment, in terms of relating this to God, it's like, okay, if we understand that God exists for all of these reasons, then that means something for us, right? So we have this eternal principle, this eternal truth. We have all of these arguments. Oh, the only reason that I exist and the reason that anything exists is by participation, like, in God. So like if there is this prime mover, this first cause, right, the supreme being, then the only reason that I exist is by participating in that being of God. So if God, presumably he wouldn't, but if at some moment, right, he willed to stop, right, willing the universe into existence, we would all cease to exist.
Yes.
And so it's sort of the opposite, right? If we have this understanding of the eternal truth, we can understand something about the world around us. So it's the going in the reverse direction. We can understand something about the world around us, therefore we understand something about eternal truth. That's the Inventionis, way of discovery, way of judgment. We understand something eternal, we can understand something about the world around us.
Yes. So the first one is like proof of God through observing what's around us and this world exists. And the other isn't it really kind of, it's not reasoning that God exists, it's reasoning our purpose once we establish God exists.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I think that's right. I think we can discover something about the way that we are by appealing
our
to those
purpose
eternal,
and morality and truth and all that kind of stuff. Based once you establish God exists, there's order in the world and we're reasoning and we have free will, then we can establish the judgment going forward of what to do and what to believe, I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's right. And then he kind of describes a little bit on page 13 with problems if we don't understand this properly.
Yes.
So that's where he sort of appeals to like Spinoza, the Neoplatonists, this pantheistic ontologism. So what he's saying is, right, if we confuse this too much, then we're saying that everything is God itself, right? And then that's sort of what Spinoza went into. And you see this sometimes with the Neoplatonists, where it's hard to differentiate then, if you take this too extreme, what is and what is not God. So it's like, well, if this all exists because of God, God is working through all these things only exist because of God, then isn't God in some way all things? And he's like, yeah, in some way, God's existence is what allows all of this to exist, but I can't confuse this bed for being God himself. I can't confuse people for being God himself, right? There's a difference between these things.
Yes.
But if we confuse that too much, we get into this weird pantheism.
Yes. Well, that's a good explanation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think that's a particularly modern problem, is that sort of I think you see this a lot with sort of the spiritual but not religious sort of crowd, where it's like, well, if God made everything, then God is everything, man. And it's like, we should respect nature, man, because everything's God, and I'm God in some way, man. And so it's like, in an attempt to like describe everything depending on God, it becomes really self-centered, because I feel like a lot of the time it becomes what I say goes, because I'm in some way God of my own universe, because God is working through me, or the spirit, or whatever it might be.
Yes.
So I think that's very much still a problem today.
Yeah, you see that where people, I'm sorry, where people are get caught up on making demands upon God based upon what they feel God should be. And they fall into that trap where it's like, well, I'm spiritual, not religious, because the underlying assumption is I know better. I know better than the church. I know better than these other people or great thinkers, or or they wouldn't think they're great thinkers. But I see that a lot with people who are no longer Catholic, where they're like, well, I'm spiritual but not religious, because, and they can, any of us can probably easily write down a list of 20 things that are administratively wrong with the Catholic Church during our lifetime. Or mistakes are made, or, and then a lot of times it's, well, this particular priest did this bad thing. This was rude to me, or said these bad things, or would let my such and such get married in the church, or whatever. And it seems like it's just kind of an excuse for not being humble enough to realize, maybe I gotta follow the rules, and maybe I don't know everything. Yeah, but whatever. Tomato. People just choose their own path, I guess. Yeah, and it's sad, because I've really seen this since, I forget which season it was. We read about the history of the Catholic Church, and there would be people that would break off. Like I always think of Martin Luther, and I've got a biography of him I got to read. Not Martin Luther King, Jr. Yes. Martin Luther, because he was right about some stuff, and he split off, and it's like, once you split off, you just kind of lose your moorings. Yeah. And then you substitute your judgment for God, for God's judgment, or what's in the Bible, or Jesus. It's like, and you're saying, well, I'm Christian, but I don't believe in any particular religion. It's like, okay, well then what was Jesus doing but trying to get us to come together with the church, right? Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's all right. That's one of the most, because, I've talked to a lot of people who are coming from Protestantism to Catholicism, because I help with the OCIA group down in Florida, the University of Florida student campus down there. And that's a lot of people echo that, is like they kind of have this realization, especially people coming from like non-denominational backgrounds, where it's like, okay, so it's all very much based on sort of the self-interpretation, right? They have this some sort of theological belief in sort of the guiding of the Holy Spirit, but then it gets to a point where it's like, well, hang on, what this guy is saying, and he's supposedly guided by the Holy Spirit, is completely different from this pastor saying just down the street, right? And they both say that they're Christians. Who's to decide? Is it me? Why do I have the authority to decide that personally? Right. So that's what leads, what I've seen a lot of people sort of towards Catholicism, is like realizing, oh, there's more to it than just me or this individual guy over here. Yeah. We have to have some standard. And they look and they're like, okay, well, where did the Bible come from in the first place, right? It had to be compiled. It had to be agreed upon, like what is Scripture, what's not Scripture. Who did that compiling? Who made those decisions? So it's the descendants of the apostles, right? And the bishops and the early priests of the church, the early church fathers. It's like, okay, well, there was a church that existed even prior to like the Bible being compiled, or even any of the Gospels being written. There had to be a community of people, especially endowed, by Christ. And that's a very compelling argument that I found for a lot of people if they sort of go down that track themselves. Yeah,
and I think it's got to be hard to be in a non-denominational church. Because you're so dependent on your particular minister or pastor, or some of you studied the Bible and they usually have like a divinity degree or a degree similar to that. And I've met a lot of really great ministers. They're Baptist or whatever, or just straight up non-denominational, just some Christian, and they just have like a board of directors, the local people. But then they quite often get into not physical fights, but they also get really bad arguments over doctrine. Yeah, and they have split off, and it's got to be very disruptive to be a member of a church, and then you have factions, and then this group splits off to that church, and and I know that's happened with the Catholic Church, obviously over that's how all the other denominations came into existence at one time or another. But it's got to be really disruptive because it happens like every few years for some of them. Yeah. And then they'll pop up. I mean, there's so many churches, and I really love that there's so many churches, and they're all great people. But it's got to be really hard when you can kind of come and go as you please. And I know a few people that depending on the kind of their mood, or what they want to listen to or hear. They'll go to a different church on Sunday. Yeah. Like if they want there'll be a pastor that's always like super upbeat. If they want to pick me up, they go to Pastor so-and-so. And then there's somebody else that's like fire and brimstone. They really think, man, I need somebody to tell me I'm a sinner and I need to repent. I go to the pastor so-and-so. But it's got to be kind of like, okay, well, wait a second. What's the truth? Like capital T truth. I think that's got to be more difficult, and I understand the criticism of the Catholic liturgy, but and I used to criticize it because it was just kind of like rote memorization, and sometimes you're saying it without even thinking about it, and it seems mundane. But as I get older, it's like I like that consistency. If I can go to Mass anywhere, and it's especially if it's within the same archdiocese, it's going to be the same. Yeah. And there's something to that because it's like it's set on a set in stone. Yeah. And if anybody deviates from that, you're like, what are you doing? Yeah.
Well, I think it's, not saying that this doesn't happen with Catholics. Like there's a lot of Catholics who just don't know Catholic theology, and that's a problem in itself. But I think a lot of the times it's like how many people like know why like their chosen Protestant church exists. Like how many Presbyterians now are like ardent Calvinists and are at the Presbyterian church because they really believe in Calvinism. Right. It's like, I'd probably guess not too many. Yeah. Like maybe your pastor, leans a little bit more in a Calvinistic direction, sort of his like moral advice, or whatever. Right. But it's like, how many people are really like, okay, well, I'm a Presbyterian and not a Lutheran because I believe in the Calvinist view of things rather than the Lutheran view of justification or whatever it is. And it's like, well, that's, why go there? And a lot of times it is because of just the pastor or whatever community is here. Right. And, they might not really know why this church exists at all. Right. And,
yeah. It's fascinating.
Yes.
All right. Sorry, I went down
that's all right.
The side path.
Yes. But that is the, sort of turning back to the book, that is the classical via Inventionis and via Judicii, right?
Yes.
And sort of describing, knowledge of God and then knowledge sort of the world, once we have these eternal principles. And so the argument that Garrigou-Lagrange is then making is that there's another sort of lesser talked about sort of corresponding idea of this in St. Thomas's writings. And he says, according to the Via Acquisitionis or Via Inventionis, human reasoning proceeds from certain things that are simply known, which are first principles. And then reflexively turning back, the Via Judicii, by way of resolution, returns to the first principles in light of which it examines what it has discovered. This is broader. So he says this is not just about God, right? This is an understanding of like how we know anything at all, right? That we have to have knowledge of these first principles, right? And sort of corresponding to this idea of God, right? We know this eternal truth about God in the same way about knowing anything else. We know that there are some eternal truths just about the world around us. And then based on that, we can use these truths that we sort of just intuitively grasp to understand the world again. Right? That turning back from these sort of principles. You look confused.
No, I mean, I'm trying to, I'm trying to say it in a different way, and it's not coming to me.
Yeah. I think the classic example, and I think he references it in here possibly, right? It's like the law of contradiction, right? That A and not A cannot both be true at the same time, right? And so that's like a first principle that we just intuitively grasp, right? If we didn't have that, we can't come to know anything, right? So this via inventionis, or this way of acquisition is the other word he used, this way of discovery or acquisition, right? We just acquire that. We acquire that A and not A cannot both be true at the same time. If we didn't have that, we can't understand anything else. So we immediately grasp this eternal truth, this eternal principle, this first principle upon which all of the principles come from, and then we can draw approximate conclusions from that. And that's how all learning happens in some way. That it has to go back to something that we just intuitively grasp. There's some gift of human reason that lets us just know that.
Yes. And going back a few pages, he mentions Descartes. Which is kind of similar to what you're saying. It's like, but he says, Thomas, and this is on 15. Thomas cannot admit that the first thing known by our intellect is the cogito, just our self. There are things that outside of knowing that we exist that we have to know first, and that's the foundation. The foundation is not, I think, therefore I am. I already am, and I didn't create me, and I didn't create this world. And I think that goes along with what you're saying, that Thomas Aquinas is like a reality and a facts-based philosophy. It's like, okay, you're not arguing about that God exists. I mean, you make the argument that God exists, but you're not arguing with it all the time.
Right.
That you've established it, that's it. And then you're able to use that as a foundation. There's certain truths that are discoverable and knowable, and you're just trying to do your best to understand the truth and scientific truth based upon the principles that are the foundation of all this.
I think it's a little deeper than that too, because I think his point with Descartes, right, what we recognize first isn't the fact that we are knowing, right? The cogito itself, right? I know, right? It's like we know something, and then after that we can reflect, oh, I knew of something there. It's like I know a fact, or I know the law of non-contradiction, right? I'm thinking about that thing rather than thinking about thinking. It's like sort of, if I'm seeing the bed right now, I'm not seeing the fact that I'm seeing the bed. And then I can think back and I can reflect, I'm seeing this. There's some sort of sense happening here.
It's like a secondary thought.
And so it's not immediately that we're grasping that we are thinking. We have to think about something.
And you think, well, of course that's true, but it's really important when you get into these people that are so esoteric. They're like, no, it's, like we're all part of the matrix. You don't really know that, the bed is there, that you're experiencing these things. It could all just be a product of your own mind or of another mind or whatever. And it just goes on from there.
There's like even farther than this, like the Sam Harris, like the new atheist guys. I think this is from him, but I was talking to a guy not too long ago who somewhat subscribed to some of these ideas, but he's like, well, I don't even really exist. Like denying the fact that he existed. And I'm like, okay, well, what's doing the denying? Like there is something that has to be denying that, right? That's Augustine's exact argument. The see, follow, or assume. If I doubt, therefore I am.
I think there should be immunity to kill anyone who says, I don't know that I exist. Or at least attempt. I think maybe we should just have an immunity to attempt and not not kill them.
Yeah.
Because I think they would find out very fast. They are convinced that they exist.
Yeah. But this guy's point was, and I think he's taking this from Sam Harris, he was like, well, that's just the fact that I think that there is some me thinking is a result of like grammar. Like the fact that we just kind of talk about these things, right? We use I and you, and therefore we assign I and you to something. And I'm like, well, who's doing the assigning?
Yeah.
What is using grammar here? If there's no you using grammar, this argument then falls apart. He's like, I'll have to think more about that.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's just sort of like appealing to language is just like, it's a labeling problem. I'm like, well, there has to be something that is doing the labeling.
You know, I agree with your intellectual exercise, and that's brilliant. I feel like, I'm not advocating for violence, but I feel like there's been too many people that have never been punched in the face. You know, I mean, I think, and I mean that like really, like how can you even, I mean, other than as a joke, how can you ever say, well, I don't know that I exist and it's just all words and nominalism and I'm part of the matrix? Yeah, until you get punched in the face. And then you're like, ow.
Yeah.
And you know, was that part of the matrix? No, it's like, if you can't, it's like some people try to be so smart, they end up being fools, you know?
It's like what I kind of ended up thinking about it, like after the fact, I'm not saying this as a threat in any way, but it's like, well, why don't you kill yourself? It's like, if I don't exist, why am I prolonging whatever this thing that may be happening is?
Well, I think people go down that path.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's very depressing.
Absolutely, because it's depressing, and you can't answer what difference does it make.
Yeah,
especially if you are suffering. So if you're suffering, and you don't really believe you really exist as an independent, valuable person, boy, it's easy to go down that path.
Yeah,
and I think that there's an underlying evil in that entire philosophy, and I got to tell you, I'm getting more and more convinced there really are like demons in the world, and I don't, and I know that sounds goofy, but especially now that there's cameras everywhere. And you see, like there was just a shooting a week or so ago out in, I think it was Idaho at In-N-Out Burger. And I don't even know what the backstory is, but this guy was in the drive-thru and he pulls out a gun and shoots the gal who's serving him from the drive-thru window. Yeah. And then he's just shooting people. And I'm not trying to absolve him of any guilt of it, but man, and I think that kind of philosophy and people that espouse that kind of soul destructive belief system where it's like you have no value is just so bad, and it's so clever and evil. You know what I'm saying? And so anyway, so I think this, like the Thomistic thought, where you have it based upon evidence and reason and logic and the physical world all together, has such a tremendous value, and I feel like that's part of the resurgence of it. Yeah, is that it's like, okay, it's an intellectual basis for what we all think of as like a common sense belief in God and a common sense belief in reality and in science. But it says it in a complex philosophical language, including Latin words that I don't know.
Yeah. That's why I'm here.
Yes. But I don't know how much more you have to say, but I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, one more. I think big point. Good. Yeah,
because I got one last thing that I wanted to say, but I can go first or last.
This is actually kind of related to like the nothing really exists man point. But he makes a really, really good argument here that, sort of we have these, first principles and we proceed to proximate causes. And then there's always the cycle of like looking back, right? The via judicii, this way of judgment, and like examining, does this actually explain the conclusions that I've come to, right? Yes. Is there explanatory force here? And that's what he says. It's like, this is what Euclid did, right? In his geometry, right? In his understanding of physics and stuff like that. And I think this is a really good point on page 17, where he's talking about like the principle of inertia, right? Every body in motion, no longer being influenced by another body's motion, will always remain in rectilinear and uniform motion, et cetera, et cetera. He says this is of great importance, for in it modern physics is opposed to ancient physics. And what he essentially ends up describing is that a lot of sort of modern scientific research isn't really doing this way of judgment, right? It's coming up with sort of models that explain the data, right? You're moving from conclusion to conclusion, but you're not taking that sort of way of judgment back and looking at, does this actually explain what it is that I'm looking at here? Is this just a model that sort of fits the data am I actually looking at the causes of things? That's a really important point. There's a great book that I read earlier this summer by Owen Barfield, who's great. He's one of the Inklings.
Okay.
Yeah. He's a really great book called Saving the Appearances. And he essentially makes this exact argument. It's in the title of the book. The subtitle's like A Study in Idolatry, I think. And he says like a lot of modern science, and he's writing this like in mid 20th century, is designed just to save the appearances. You're not actually asking what is causing these things. You're saying, can I map this to some explanation that saves the appearances of whatever data I'm looking at? Right? Can I change this variable in this sort of graphing or mapping calculation that accounts for this without actually asking what is causing this? It's like I can, plot a great graph and describe, this led to this and then this and this, but I'm actually talking about what is causing this.
Yes.
And I think that's the exact point that Lagrange is making here. This is saying we're not doing that way of judgment. We're not considering the causes of things.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Well, I like at the very end, he's talking about the very last paragraph of his conclusion. He mentions St. Pius X, which is the patron saint of your alma mater high school. It was put together I've got some of his encyclicals, a book downstairs, and it has the Catechism of the Catholic Church that he wrote, which actually is really, really good. I know it's a little passé, I guess, after Vatican II, but a lot of what he has in there, some of it was like old school. But anyway, but if anybody has, why does the Catholic Church believe this? It's really a good primer on a lot of the basic stuff. Why do we do what we do, and what are the basic beliefs? Anyway. But he mentions the words of St. Thomas himself. This is the author. A small error in the beginning is great by the end. And it's so true. That's what he's talking about. You have to have the foundation of, the establishment that you believe in God, and you have this foundational philosophy about what is knowledge, how to gain knowledge, and what is valuable. Because if you don't have that, then you're really going to go off and your errors are going to multiply.
Yeah, I agree.
That was a good little spot at the end.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else you had.
I mean, I like what he says on 19, just sort of as a comparison, sort of summing up what he has said. Bottom of page 19, these two last paragraphs.
Yes.
Thus, there's a twofold via inventionis, or way of discovery, namely, one, the via inventionis to the supreme cause, or to the existence of God, so from temporal things to the existence of God, and two, the via inventionis of the sciences, or that which they follow in coming to their conclusions, right? So we understand anything. And by the way, I meant to mention this earlier, that the word science just comes from like the Latin word to know.
Yes.
Right? And so not talking about like necessarily physical science, but just in knowing.
Anything, yes.
And then he says, equally, there's a twofold via judicii, or way of judgment, namely one, the via that judges concerning all finite things in light of their supreme cause, right? So we come to knowledge of God, and then examining the world, in comparison to God and the divine attributes. And two, the via that judges concerning the values of the various conclusions of a given science through resolution to its first certain principles, or it's to its hypothetical postulates, right? And so once we have sort of a science, right, evaluating, do these conclusions explain what we have come to?
Yes.
And more often than not, we are not doing that adequately. We're just sort of moving from conclusion to conclusion without asking, does this actually explain the result that I'm coming to? Does this provide causative value?
Yes. Good explanation.
Yes. Thank you.
It was a challenging chapter, but worthwhile. I mean, I don't feel bad that I'm reading it.
Yeah.
I think there was one book that we had in one season I was really not happy with.
Yes, there was the terrible linguistics book.
Yeah, we both agreed
the George Lakoff. That was, I think,
Oh,
towards the end, we were
I
doing
was calling him bad names.
We were doing like 3 chapters a day because we just wanted to get through it as quick as 3 chapters a recording. Yeah. But the next time we're talking, this is exciting. Chapter 2 on the search for definitions according to Aristotle and St. Thomas. So this is very interesting for me. I meant to mention this at the top. This relates to the research that I want to do right in my PhD program, is talking about Thomistic philosophy of language, how we understand the world, either through language or the role that language plays, and sort of is there a cohesive sort of Thomistic philosophy of language that emerges from St. Thomas. It's very exciting stuff.
So we'll have to wait and see if you can get someone to read your PhD thesis after it's published.
Maybe it'll be us.
It'll be at least one reader beside yourself. I'll read it.
There we go.
And then maybe your listener.
Yes. All right. Well, do you have any other final thoughts?
I have lots of thoughts.
Are you going to share it?
Oh, no.
Okay. All right, well, this has been Season 15, Episode 1 of Unlimited Opinions. I have been Adam Bishop.
I am still Mark Bishop.
You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at ULMTD Opinions. This was good. I think we had a better conversation than I was expecting. I was almost expecting you to be like, "This is dumb."
No, it was just thick.
Yeah.
You know?